Whenever you're ready, Mr. Wexler.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the work session. I'd like to announce that the board met in executive session on personnel and real estate issues prior to this meeting. Please all stand for the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is a presentation by Mr. Victor Donay on a community solar project, and he will be remote, so.
Great. Are people able to see the slide?
Right now, we're seeing a blank screen, the blue screen. We're seeing your desktop.
Okay, let me try again. How about now?
Yes, we see the slides now.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, commissioners, for giving us a chance to talk with you tonight about solar energy as a way to help the township meet its goal for moving forward on the Ready for 100 commitment. My name is Victor Donay. I'm a Haverford Town resident in the Coopertown area, and I'm a professor of mathematics at Bryn Mawr College. I teach a course on math modeling and sustainability, and growing out of that course, we have this project that we're going to talk to you tonight. Two of the students who are working on the project are Li Wei Yang, who's a senior at Bryn Mawr College, and John-Luca Fenton, a senior at Haverford College. We've been fortunate to have a number of community members join in the project: Joy Baxter, Jennifer Leith, and Dave Foster. Joy has a doctorate in chemical engineering, so brings a strong scientific background. Jennifer works in the foundation world and has many contacts there. And Dave works in socially responsible development. So all of their expertise have been very helpful as we work on this project of helping the township move forward on the Ready for 100 commitment.
Awesome. Hi, so I'm John Luca. I guess first, just to provide a little background, as Victor mentioned, we were part of his Math and State Sustainability course last semester, and one of our main focuses was the German energy revolution. And what really caught our eyes was that nearly half of all renewable energy in Germany is owned by private people, either farmers or private persons. And most of these efforts are community-centered co-ops where groups of people sort of buy in together to create a larger solar array. And that was really sort of the catalyst for our idea and sparked our research. So looking out at Haverford, we kind of saw this awesome overlay of the fact that Haverford Township already is a leader in environmental sustainability. 2009, over a decade ago, the Climate Action Plan was initiated by the Board of Commissioners, and that sort of laid out the plan of how the township was going to respond to the ongoing climate crisis. And a large component of this was energy reduction initiatives, and also on the left there, the construction of the CREC Center. And so this environmental center that is LEED certified and is powered by geothermal energy is sort of this bastion for environmental action in the township. And really, so the township already is sort of this environmental leader. And even in a decade removed from the action plan, the Ready for 100 commitment that the board unanimously approved in 2018 committed the town to achieving 100% renewable energy by 2035. And so our project we'll be discussing today will really sort of help us reach that goal. And digging deeper into the Ready for 100 pledge, its essential essence is that the township is committed to achieving 100% clean and renewable energy by 2035, as I mentioned. And these renewable sources focus on wind, solar, hydro, tidal, and geothermal. What's especially interesting is that there's a local focus in the Ready for 100 pledge, and specifically there's language saying that locally produced and distributed energy is prioritized whenever feasible. And our project, as you will soon see, is solely locally focused and would really hammer home this initiative in the Ready for 100 pledge. So now the issue is that reaching 100% renewable energy by 2035 is no easy task, but we believe that our project will be the first step in many to reaching this. And so we sort of understand our project and the municipality's efforts on this community solar project as sort of the pacemaker for the whole township and sort of a catalyzer for greater action. So our projects, we believe, will sort of catalyze greater action at the school district level, at the nonprofit level, and at the commercial level in the township. And along those lines too, another interesting sort of overlay we see is that residents who see the township taking this action on solar will be more interested in putting solar on their own homes after just seeing how realistic and doable it is at a larger scale. And along those lines, we think it'll help complement the Solarized Delco initiative that's already going on in Haverford Township. That is sort of a platform for community residents to get solar, or a streamlined approach to solar for community members. And so we think our efforts would collaborate well with those.
The first step in reaching the goals of the municipality is putting rooftop solar on the township buildings. Right now we have roofs that are just roofs, and we can make those into electricity producing roofs. The first reason is that rooftop solar has been identified as the number 10 solution of 100 solutions to reverse global warming by Project Drawdown. So it's a proven impact in reducing global warming. Also, this locally produced electricity will allow for a community engagement and education. And we believe that by doing this, local people will basically lead to multiplication. They'll be engaged. They'll say, well, why don't we have this on our home? Why don't we have this on the schools? Why don't we have this on our business? Third, we'd be adding renewable capacity to Pennsylvania's energy supply. And this is better than just buying renewable energy credits. Is actually increasing the renewable energy capacity. Also, we'd be using local solar developers, so we'd be increasing regional economic development. Imagine walking into the CREC lobby or the township building lobby and seeing a display of the electricity being produced by the solar panels in real time. Not just the electricity being produced, you can see the amount of carbon dioxide that would have been displaced by using the renewable energy. And then this can be used for education purposes. For the Haverford Township students will be able to learn more about renewable energy conversion. And we could even have this as a link on our website. So what is involved with installation? First thing to know is there's no maintenance. And these are a long-term installation. These have 25-year warranties. And the system, after 25 years, is still 85% as efficient as it was on day one. Imagine that for an air conditioner. And these are connected to the grid. So that means that when it's sunny, the electricity is being produced by the solar panels. And when it's cloudy, the electricity is going to come from the grid, just like it is today. And these systems are expected to last around 45 years. So these are long-term investment opportunities.
So solar is great, but where can we build solar here? And we found 4 great solar sites in Haverford Township, The first one is CRAC. As Gianluca says, CRAC is already an environmental education center in Haverford, and it's built with solar in mind, so it has great roofs, it's south-facing, there's also very minimal shading. So the CRAC is going to give us about 200 kilowatt capacity of the system. To have a reference, this is about 25 residential homes electricity usage. And the energy is also going to cover 40 to 60% of the CRAC electricity usage. The next site is Scadium. It's an excellent solar potential. It's a slightly bigger size, and it's going to cover 25% of the building's electricity usage. And the third one is the Hilltop Facilities buildings, and it's a bigger size, and those 5 roofs together is going to give us about 300 kilowatt system, so about 35 residential homes electricity usage, and the energy together is going to cover all the electricities those buildings need. So the last one is the township building. So it's a smaller size, but it's also going to cover 20% of the electricity needed. And in the meanwhile, as a center of the township's government, having solar panels on the roof is a good reminder to tell people that the township has put in a lot of efforts in protecting the environment and having a greener life. To sum up all the township solar resources together, so those 4 sites together is going to give us about 900 kilowatt of the system. It's going to cover 30% of the township's electricity usage. If you look at the capital side, it's going to cover it's going to save the township $80,000 every year, kind of tie back to what Joy said about the solar. The township paid one upfront cost, but then the system runs for almost half of the century. So in the long term, the township is not only just protecting the environment, they're also going to save some money in the long run.
So the upfront cost, or the installation cost, is basically all there is to solar. So because of no maintenance. And this installation cost is driven by economy of scale, where the larger the system, the smaller the price per watt. So a small commercial system would have a larger price per watt than a large commercial system. The income comes from the savings from the electricity that the panels produce. In addition, and that was the 80,000 that Leeway mentioned. In addition, income comes from solar renewable energy credits, and these are sold on the open market. What's not available to the township or other nonprofits are tax benefits. If you look at the pie chart on the right, the tax benefits come in two ways, and these are in blue. You'll notice this is a large section of the installed cost, large fraction of the installed cost, with the first being a federal income tax credit, which is available to residents as well as companies, and the depreciation, which is only available to companies. 2 things to note here. First, that the federal income tax credit is stepping down year after year now. We are hoping to have an installation in Haverford Township in 2021 for the reason that the next year in 2022, the federal income tax credit will be less than half of what it is in 2021. And we want to make use of this potential savings. What inspired us initially, what Gianluca talked about, was community being able to invest in solar. And we looked into this, and in our initial meeting in July, which some of you were able to attend, we talked about one option. And that we ran into some problems, but after talking to many different leaders in solar energy, we came across a model that we're really excited about. It's a community co-op in northeastern Pennsylvania, where members of the community have formed a co-op They've been able to complete 3 projects, then they have 2 ongoing, and 1 is with their municipality. The co-op members earn a modest 2% annual return, and this has been successful. This is a little bit more complicated, but we think having the community involved is worth it. So other options for financing include just taking out the low municipal bond that is available right now, but that does not make use of the tax benefits. The next 3 options do: the power purchase agreement, a municipal bond with basically a percentage off the top of it by partnering with an investment company. So it would be 10% off. And then also the community investment option, which I mentioned. A power purchase agreement is where the township would not own the panels. They would basically buy the electricity from the panels. And this comes with a term of agreement. During the term, the township could buy the panels, the system, either during it or at the end, but there's a little bit of uncertainty. Most likely, the power purchase agreement would not be set up that we just automatically get the panels at the end. So that's one of the things to think about, since they do last a long time. Another opportunity for community involvement, in addition to the community investment option, is simply having people donate. And this could be donating a panel in honor of a loved one, or a teacher, or someone else that is meaningful in the community. And we believe that this would lead to the community involvement and be a viable option. One of the things to note is that the costs of these are similar or just slightly higher to the existing low rate of electricity that the township is paying. And this would be for 30% of the township usage.
So why now? Why us in Haverford Township? And I think of the words of our friend Jan Marie Rutherford, who was such an inspiration for us in the township when it came to environmental issues. We are the first generation to see the effects of climate change, and the last generation able to head off the worst effects. This summer, yet again, we were reminded of the problems with extreme weather, with very heavy rainfall that leads to flooding here in the township, with great damage to some of the community residents who face this flooding. But while we face this challenge, we also have an opportunity to educate and inspire our residents, our young people, to get them engaged in helping to solve these problems that the world is facing. And we've already found very strong community interest in this solar panel project. We had 45 community residents join us in July for a webinar talking about this idea, and several of them were interested in joining the investment fund that we were looking into. So our suggestion to the commissioners is to start now with forming a solar team. We have a lot more data and financial information than we shared with you today, and we'd like to work with a team of township staff and other residents to examine these options and come back with a recommendation to the board about which would be the best option for the township to follow. You know better than us how the annual budget works, but we think it's very important that there be a line item in the 2021 budget for solar so that we can work to bring solar to Haverford Township by the December 2021 tax deadline. As Joy mentioned, if we can finish the project or get it started significantly by the end of 2021, there's quite a bit of tax savings that we can achieve. So our suggestion is to have the township solar planning team work in the fall, come back at the end of the fall or early in the new year to the commissioners, present a recommendation to you that you would approve in the spring. We would then solicit proposals from solar installers. Over the summer, we'd choose the winning bid and sign a contract so that the installation could proceed in the fall, leading to this important tax deadline of December 2021. Also, we view this solar planning team as very useful to the township going into the future. There are quite a few fast-moving developments in the solar field, both at the state and federal, about new laws and regulations that could happen, and would like this team to help the township keep abreast of what's happening and be ready to take advantage of new opportunities. So we're glad to answer any questions you might have. We'd like to thank you for your attention. We'd like to thank the Haverford Environmental Advisory Committee, who helped us develop our proposal and do our research. The Township Recreation Department and Brian Barrett were very helpful with information about the CREC. We've talked to quite a number of solar companies and experts around the state, the Reinvestment Fund, the Energy Co-op, the Philadelphia Energy Authority, the Pennsylvania Solar Center, the Collective Sun Company. 3 solar companies gave us preliminary estimates and information that helped in our planning: Independent Solar, Solar States, and Superior Solar Design. And I should say, as we talked to these companies, they were very excited that a township here in Southeast Pennsylvania was moving to take leadership on this initiative. In addition to doing the right thing, something that we in the township can be proud of, it would also be a model for other communities and help them move forward to this next step. I'll finish by thanking Haverford College and Bryn Mawr College, who provided funding for Leeway and John Newton's internship, as well as providing us these wonderful students to help work with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. Very enlightening. Any questions, Mr. President?
I have a question, Mr. President.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, Victor, you mentioned having this as a line item in the budget for next year. That would be assuming that the township was going to basically float a bond for the full cost of the project. Is that what you're assuming? And my second question is, I'm not quite sure how a private-public partnership would work if we use public funds and in combination with private investors who would benefit from the tax credits. How can we commingle public money with private individuals benefiting from those tax credits?
So your first question about the timing. So one option would be for the township to buy the panels by floating a bond. There is a company that we've found that the township could work with that would be able to provide about a 10% discount because the township would pay this company the cost of the bond, and then they would use it on their end to make a financial partnership with tax equity investors. And that part of that saving that Joy mentioned, up to 40%, 10% of that would come to the township. These other approaches, for example, the power purchase agreement, or this municipal bond with the tax benefit, in the back door of all of those programs, there are investors who are getting income out of that project. So whether it's a power purchase agreement, whether it's this discounted bond purchase, or whether it's a community investment fund, all of those approaches would be providing income for somebody. The only one that would not provide any income would be if the township just bought the panels directly using the bond, but that would actually cost the township more.
But we could commingle, we could invest alongside private investors with them receiving a return on their investment, and obviously our return would be the benefit of the electricity savings, I assume.
Yeah, as we understand it, that's a very standard way that these deals are set up.
Okay.
And so we don't know, for example, if the township would decide to do a power purchase agreement, would that type of thing need to be in this coming year's budget? That's kind of things we don't really understand, but you do.
Thank you, Victor. And thank you to everyone for all your effort. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Holmes.
Donnie, thank you. I was along with some of my colleagues on the first call about this, and since that time, thought about it,
had some more questions to ask. Very specifically, one of your colleagues, I don't know if it was Ms. Yang or Ms. Baxter, brought up the community investment model, the Clean Energy Co-op in northeastern Pennsylvania. Could we get some details on those projects, and in particular, what municipality, and I mean, you could send them to us, but what municipality entered into one of these transactions with the Clean Energy Co-op, and kind of the scope of the transaction, the size of the project? That would be very helpful for us.
Yes, most of the projects are that have been a little smaller than what we're looking at. They have been very gracious and have shared spreadsheets, or been able to share lots of working documents. And we're even in talks, could we even set up a chapter, like a Haverford Township chapter of their co-op? So they've been more than willing to share any information, and we do have some of that data.
Great. If you could share that with us, that would be helpful. Victor, you stated fairly matter-of-factly that if Haverford Township were simply to undertake this project by itself, that would be the most expensive option. And has somebody done the actual financial analysis on that? I mean, our township is AAA rated. We're talking about $1.5 million. It won't make a difference in our debt limit because a long-term PPA, and I've asked the solicitor to confirm this, is no different from us entering into a long-term debt obligation. It's still considered debt against our books and against our debt limit. So I'm curious as to the difference in the costs of the funds, whether the township just does it, not taking advantage of the tax benefits, but taking advantage of our ability to borrow on the public market at incredibly cheap rates now and likely into the future. And also being able to remove a lot of the complicated nature of this transaction. I'm very interested in community involvement, would like the community to be doing everything that it can to encourage us to do this, and then, hopefully to follow our example and do it as well. But I do think we have an obligation at the township level to be sure that we're undertaking the most efficient and the simplest way to accomplish this. And I don't want to make all your work for naught, but if you've energized enough of us on this board to think solar is a good idea, it may very well be such a great idea that we should simply do it. We should build the arrays. We should immediately start using the energy. We can sell it back to PECO, but we don't have to have a long-term contract with a group of investors who have to have a certain guaranteed level of income. We don't have a 20-year power purchase agreement that may or may not be subject to the political vagaries of a future board that doesn't feel the same way that most or all of us do now. And so I say this to you not to get immediately a response back from you, but so that you understand my thinking on this going forward. I don't speak on behalf of anyone else on the board because we haven't spoken about this yet as a group. This is our first public conversation about this, but I do, as the head of finance and as somebody experienced in our previous bond transactions, even before I was a commissioner, I understand the complicated nature of a private-public partnership on something like this, and being able to remove that complicated structure at the cost of a couple basis points, it may be worth those basis points if we simplify this transaction, so long as we all get to the same place, which I think would be using our township assets to take advantage of solar-powered energy and set an example for the townships around us and for our residents who have any similar, roofs, or our commercial businesses that have, unused rooftops as well. Maybe we could set an example as to how to do this and how to do this simply.
May I answer that? So this is one of the, so we have done the financial analysis. Leeway has done a lot of this for us. What we're hoping is that we understand the solar side of it. We do not understand the township side of this. So that's why we want to involve the township employees, so that we don't know that where the complication lies from the township's perspective in this public-private partnership. We see it like for partnering with the investment company Collective Sun. It's just 10% off up front. To us, that seems easy, but that's why we need a team to work from your side to be able to, for you guys to say, is that easy or not?
Yeah. So, I mean, just one thing that quickly comes to mind, and I'm sure Commissioner Siegel's thinking of this, and I'm beating him to the punch. We enjoy a level of immunity as a government that for the use of our property and for how we conduct our business. But if we do have a private entity using our roofs and installing property that they own and we only lease, or we only take advantage of the energy that's produced by it, that could be a complication. That could set up an issue where the township may be facing some liability because of the private ownership of something that's on township property. There could be maintenance issues that we're concerned about. There could be labor issues. We're concerned about what our obligations are for purposes of prevailing wage, as opposed to what somebody would do who would purchase these things. I'm just saying this off the top of my head, and not to try to impress you, because there's many more issues than I'm thinking of right now. But that's it's a smart question to ask. What is it from the township side? And from the township side, as it gets more complicated, we start to burrow into things that are easy for the township to do and much harder for the township to do in conjunction with private ownership and in conjunction with private entities. So that's why just, if it comes down at the end of the day to no difference in price, it makes more sense as a township to do something as the township. It's just to the extent that there's a large difference, we're then going to have to weigh the risks we take in entering into a public-private partnership with the extra cost that might be associated therewith. And since we have, recently received a AAA rating on our basically our bonds are now investment grade, and I don't know what analysis went into comparing the private, the advantage to private investors who can take advantage of the tax credit, but at a higher rate of whatever their cost of funds are, as opposed to our rate. I don't know if that analysis was performed, but I just have to imagine at the outset that we are talking about a pretty minor delta between the township doing it themselves versus the township using private entities as well. And again, I've asked my solicitor to confirm this, but since anything involving the private entities would involve our entering into a power purchase agreement and a long-term power purchase agreement, I think that ends up being considered debt for purposes of our debt limit and of what we have to go through in order to incur debt as a township. And at that point, our analysis has to be what's easier, just issue general obligation bonds, very secure, no question that obligation's there for 20 years, as opposed to, or 25 years or 30 years, as opposed to entering into a long-term power purchase agreement we've never done before and not sure of the ramifications and not sure of the future board's obligations in a situation like that. And again, these are just some of the issues I'm thinking of quickly.
We did a bit of an analysis using roughly a 2% bond rate, and we're happy to share whatever we've found with you. The straight bond will be a little bit more expensive than these other options, but as you say, there's much less complication, so it would be, as you say, weighing the saving versus the complication.
I want to make clear, we made a commitment as a board to renewable clean energy, and I think this is a fantastic idea, and if whatever way is the most efficient and the most streamlined way for us to do this, I know there's a number of us happy to streamline that, and whatever this ends up looking like, we would not be doing our job if we didn't take advantage of the expertise you folks have already shown, as well as the expertise you continue to volunteer on this issue. So you mentioned in your PowerPoint about I know you had a name for it, but an ad hoc committee, designed specifically for this project. And I think we should create one, and I think a critical mass of you should be on it.
Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Anyone else have questions? Mr. Siegel or Mr. Lewis in the field there? No. Thank you very much. We have several items on the agenda for our work session, discussion-wise, and several things for next week. It's the first, there's two quick ones. There's one about the zoning hearing application, Upper Darby, the proposed Starbucks, 5001 Township Line Road. That's the CVS property. That discussion will resolve around asking our solicitor to represent us at the Upper Darby Zoning Hearing Board on behalf of the residents, the townships. That is, the owners of the property are asking for two variances. One, to change the use from what was approved in 2014 when the CVS was developed. And the second variance is to allow dumpsters within 50 feet of residential property based on the size of that. So that's the basis of that discussion, is to have McNichol, Byrne, Metlosky represent us in the zoning hearing board at the Upper Darby. The other second one, I'm saving, what I'm doing is trying to get to the one I think is going to take longer, so we'll get to. The other discussion is the filing of DCNR grant application for completion of trails resolution. Anybody's got any, I think that's pretty straightforward.
Actually,
Yeah.
one, it's not a DCNR, it's a DCED grant application.
Okay, we'll reflect that for the agenda next week.
And along with this, so this is a grant application to extend the Darby Trail. There has been a long-term plan to have the Darby Trail try to run from McDonald Field to the creek. There are two obstacles or two pieces of property which make it difficult. One of them is currently up for sale. And along with considering this grant, I also would like to see us put on the agenda for next week a purchase of the a possible purchase of the property.
Yeah, we discussed that. It's a real estate item for executive session. Yeah.
Can I just add, I would concur with Commissioner Hart that we.
Right. Well, I mean, you'll have the chance next week. We'll vote next week.
Mr. Berman can be successful in representing us with the seller. So, because this opportunity could pass us by pretty quickly. So I think we have to be nimble and in a position to move quickly. So worst case is we table it next week, but I think it should be on the agenda.
It will be.
Vote, assuming best case that something successful can be negotiated.
Yeah, we're going to add to that Mr. Berman or his representative can negotiate for us.
So does that mean it will be on the agenda
Under
for
discussions.
as an agenda
Yeah,
item?
I mean, this is not, we're not voting tonight. You'll have the chance to offer your concurrence, and it is a real estate issue, so it's
Okay.
more appropriate in executive session than public session for. Green Valley sanitary sewer repairs, is that Mr.
That's
Berman?
just to alert the board, you're aware that we're doing a project. You awarded a contract at last month's meeting for the slip lining project, where we're lining several sanitary sewer pipes around the township. Along Green Valley Road, there's a sewer that runs in some of the backyards, and it's been determined that the sewer's been so deteriorated that it's unable to be slip lined, and we're going to request the board to allow us to bid that for a full dig and replace. And so that'll be coming up probably in October.
Great, thank you. And then that brings us, I think, to discussion on the library. Dr. Hart, would you like to update us on, you've had some resident meetings, I guess? over there, so
The resident meetings, in regards to the library, I think in March, we had presentations for 3 options. One to renovate the library at its current site, one to build a new library at its current site, or one to build a new library at Brookline. We received, Mr. Pannoni gave us a pretty extensive background on what those would cost, and we were planning on voting at the next meeting, and the pandemic hit, and we're 6 months out, and I think we have the information. I think we need to move. This has been something that the library, it's been on hold for quite a long time. I think we're ready to vote. The discussions that we've had a ad hoc committee that has met, there's a number of residents who would, if the library does not move to Brookline, are interested in preserving the building. So we've had meetings to discuss possible options for other uses, but that's all contingent on if the library is going to move there, then that committee, what we've been doing is irrelevant, because the plan is to take the building down if the library goes to Brookline.
could you enlighten us on what the residents' attitudes, ideas, or feelings were towards either way, if the library was going to go there, or since you were there
I would say
firsthand?
that the residents in close proximity are generally not in favor, and by close proximity on the adjoining streets, I would say the majority is opposed. If I was to answer for the 8th Ward, the majority is in favor of the library going to Brookline. So you're asking me to, if we're going to leave it up to the residents on
I was just asking about the
Sagamore and
general
Kenmore,
feeling.
yes,
Got
then
it.
they are generally not in favor.
Okay.
If you were going to leave it up to the rest, to the 8th Ward residents, they are probably generally in favor. So it's,
So the traditional, not in my backyard type of, yeah.
to some extent, I mean, it's understandable, there's a lot of traffic.
Okay.
I think, the biggest thing we're looking at the library is cost there, and I think that's why we're ready to make a decision. There's a substantial difference in cost, building a new library versus renovating the current library.
Will we be voting on this on the next agenda? The meeting?
That's what I hope to take away from this meeting.
Okay, I'm all for that.
Right.
I think we've beat this horse to death. I think we need to move on.
Whoever is speaking, speak up, please.
Is the microphone?
I think he has trouble hearing me. My microphone is on. I'm sorry. I said we've been beating a dead horse here for a long time, so I think it's time to vote on this.
Agreed, and I think we owe it to everybody in the town to get this over with, so then we can decide what to do with that building there too.
Okay, so I would ask, what would be the proposed motion that you would want to vote on this? Since you're the one that wants to vote immediately, what do you vote, what do you want to vote on?
I'm going to vote for renovating the library at its current location or moving the library to Brookline School.
Okay.
I mean, there was clearly 2 options there. I mean, we got 3 options, but there's 2 that were clearly that we received from Dave Pannoni. So we can choose on those 2 options. The resolution reads something like the Board of Commissioners confirms this particular option.
Okay. I mean, we can write the option. I just want to get a feel for what you thought we were. Any other changes or comments on that? From any, Mr. Siegel, you're the property committee, or? It's going to lead to the next issue of what, depending on which way we vote, what happens to the existing property. So I think that's got to be in the back of everyone's mind as the next step that would have to be taken probably, hopefully the following month, to come up with some resolution on that building. Mr. Byrne.
I think Mr. Siegel's trying to speak.
Yeah, I'm having trouble understanding what you're saying, Commissioner Wexler, and I do have something to say anyway.
Well, go ahead,
Separate.
go ahead and say it.
Okay, first, and I've been, trying to get a vote on the library for probably a decade, and we've had a lot of things happen. But at the March meeting, we were presented with various options, including one that I think my sense was too expensive, of building a library, essentially what I'll call it on stilts. And I thought there was some sense that the board wanted to see what the cost would be for what the property committee had seen was a design that was a two-story building that would provide parking and still preserve the playgrounds. We never went further because of the pandemic. We also were concerned because at that point, the major discussion focused on the interests of the residents in the area who certainly have a voice, but they are one portion of the township. And my sense was that we were going to, in April, do as we've done, and I agree with Commissioner Oliva, almost to death, allow the public to comment. Couple that with the sense of this board and any examination of our agendas, you'd see that we have tried really hard not to present what I will call controversial or major community initiatives during the pandemic so that we would allow the public to speak. And now suddenly, without current numbers, without a definitive resolution tonight to even look at and examine, and without any sense of what are we approving, what amount we are approving, what are we telling the public we're approving, because it sounds like we're just approving a blank check, which we obviously can't do. I think this is premature. We need figures. When we voted on the administration building, we had a series of options that were delineated very clearly, and then the board addressed those options. And the board addressed, sorry, and that's now mine, sorry. The board addressed those options, and then we knew, and there were various options, and we then voted. But here, we're only apparently voting on move or renovate, and I don't feel that's appropriate, and I think, and I can't believe I'm the one saying this, we shouldn't be moving for a vote yet. Many of us aren't even, I don't anticipate being present. I anticipate participating, as I am tonight, because of, my reluctance to be in any groups during the pandemic, which we're allowed to do. So I think this should be tabled or delayed until we have a specific resolution. We know what we're voting on in terms of numbers, and we do give people other than the adjacent residents an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, good points. Any other comments from anybody else? Mr. McCloskey?
Sure. I mean, I'll just say that from my perspective, and I'm not necessarily trying to change anyone's mind or their perspective on what we should do, but we received numbers in February, and whenever we received them on the three possibilities. I think we run the risk of continuing to make this more complicated than it needs to be. If the library was about to renovate their building until the Brookline School became available, I thought it was the right decision to take it. I thought it was the right decision to do our due diligence. I think it is well past the time to make a decision that is practical on behalf of the library, so that they can have a direction. And we will make a decision based on the numbers that were given in February. And I can tell you, my leanings would be to renovate in the existing site. I think it's practical given the numbers that were given, and we should build the best library we can there. And I think it's time to let the library do that.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Mr. Holmes?
President, I do not think that we can take a vote on whether or not we renovate at the existing site of the library until we have a plan to deal with that parking. It is the sole reason why I've been against renovating at the site of the library. And we seem to be dancing around the subject that site is insufficient, that site does not have sufficient parking for us to have a good modern library there. It's one of the things that made Brookline extremely attractive. Now, there's a number of things that make Brookline difficult for local residents, as well as folks who think, it should be closer to the schools. I think the location of the existing library is terrific, but for the fact that it lacks a 50 to 75 car parking lot. And if we don't, casting a vote next week not to go to Brookline and to renovate the library, and that's our decision, and we have no plan right now as to how to deal with parking, I think is irresponsible. And I agree with Dan. This came out of the blue. All of a sudden, I don't know, it was 4 weeks ago, our last meeting, somebody said, well, it's time to talk about the library. I haven't heard people clamoring for talking about the library. They've been dealing with the current crises that we've been dealing with. And the library is going to be, whatever we do, whether we build a new one or renovate the old one, it's going to be the biggest project we've done in this township since we built this township building. And it does deserve public comment. It does deserve a lot of thought. It deserves a beating, even if it's dead, over and over a few times, because we don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to look rushed. And we don't want to make a commitment that we then regret because we didn't set up the conditions for making the existing site the best possible site for a modern, very expensive library. Now, those are my 2 cents. Anyway, I appreciate you bringing it up, Commissioner Stiegel. I'm sorry you had to go first. The same thing was bothering me as well. I appreciate you sticking your neck out.
Mr. Holmes, I really don't think we're going to look rushed. This has been going on years now. The plan was to renovate the library. We were going ahead with that until Brookline came up. We've looked at Brookline, and I don't think there's a sense that, I don't think there's 6 months from now we're going to look at Brookline and say something different. I think we have the numbers. It doesn't look doable there.
That model we were shown isn't doable. If that's the only thing we're allowed to do, then you're right, Brookline doesn't work. I think there's a lot of other things that can be done at Brookline, and I think there's a lot more at stake than just what the local residents there think about this. And we don't know what the rest of the township thinks. Whether or not we were prepared to go ahead with the work at the library, I wasn't prepared to spend $10 million on the library site if they didn't figure out parking, and they being us, or they being them, or all of us doing it together. And I'm still not prepared to make a decision. The first next big step is to commit where this is going to be if I don't know that we've got a plan for the current library's biggest problem.
Back in March, we were prepared to vote the next month, but then we got hit with this pandemic. So, what has changed in that time? If we're going to vote then, would we all have not voted then? That's what it sounds like here.
No, I just say.
We don't know what was going to happen.
Correct.
We don't know what's going to happen at the next.
Mr. McCluskey has the floor right now.
Just to point out, though, before Brookline became available, you can say you weren't going to vote to spend the money, but all that was left was us to vote to spend the money. They were already proceeding with plans. They were going to break ground as soon as we voted. Right. Like, the money was already allocated. We had already decided. The library had architects. They had plans. It was going forward. It stopped at the last second. So it wasn't like they were waiting on us to decide. We had already, in principle, decided.
Yeah, we should stop, I would say.
So, and I would just say, Commissioner Holmes, you frequently tell us that we don't want to let perfect get in the way of good. And renovating the library at its existing site is not perfect. It doesn't have the parking we need, but it is, given the prices that we received, we should try to make that the best library we can do under the circumstances.
And I appreciate that comment. I appreciate you throwing it back at me, Mr. McCluskey. Bravo, indeed, and I mean that. But we have not taken any step in months to address some potential situations that could happen at the parking. We didn't. I agree with Dan that I do not understand why all of a sudden next week we have to vote on a resolution we haven't seen and don't have the details of, and is going to make the yes/no decision on Brookline or the current site. Wherever we were in March, the world changed. This is where we are now. I'd like us to do this right. I'd like us to investigate, at least get the cost of what it would be to create parking somewhere. I I still have not heard back of any communications that we might have had with property owners about potential parking around it. And, this is information that I think we all need to have before we make this decision. Brookline School was, it was manna from heaven, I guess, although now it seems a lot less like manna, a lot more like a huge white elephant. But I agree with Dan that I think that we're suddenly in a rush for no reason, and that's my position.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, I haven't heard, do you have any comment?
Andy, you're muted.
Can't hear you.
There you go. Thank you.
I like to hear what Kevin has to say and what the library committee has to say and what the sense of the library board is at this point. I think we have kind of beat this to death. And as Mr. Quinn said, I think we were pretty close to making a decision before the pandemic came. And I'm not sure. I think we're going to delay it and end up in the same place 6 months or 9 months from now, rather than making a decision now or next month or whenever we make it, and get the library in a position where they can have, the next generation library for next 100 years. So I'm prepared. I'm prepared to take public comment, but I'm also prepared to make a decision.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm pretty much in the same boat. Some of our meetings, we've had many public comments. I think I could go back through the minutes. We've had at least 3 meetings where we had a substantial number of public speakers from all over the township, not just the 8th Ward, primarily the 8th Ward, but that's understandable. They're the neighborhood that's directly affected. So on the same thing, and just to refresh memories, the presentation that Mr. Pannoni gave us back in February, based on his presentation dated January 31st, on a scale, don't hold me to the exact numbers, but roughly 12 million to renovate, 30 million, 29 and change, new library at Brookline. So the order of magnitude is about, almost not quite 3 to 1, but it's a 3 times. It's going to be close. I'm sure the renovation cost at this point with the delay have gone up, but consequently so have the building costs. And the demolition cost may have even gone up. So, I'm prepared to vote. I understand Mr. Siegel's concerns as well. I just kind of think based on the numbers that we're going to, as Mr. Lewis just eloquently stated, we're probably, if we hold off, we're going to end up in the same spot. So I'm prepared to vote, or I'm prepared to take, but I think even if it ends up that they renovate, I think we have to be vigilant as a township and the library and the library board continuing to look for opportunities for parking in that area, whether it be the purchase of a house adjacent or adjacent properties or commercial properties adjacent to it for a parking lot, or for a public lot by the township to expand our public parking lots. I think that's what we have to look forward to going there.
Mr. President?
Mr. Holmes, go ahead.
Can we invite a representative of the library board?
Sure, there'll be.
To come to the meeting and tell us, what their position is, and B, what they're hearing.
I will request a memo from the library board to us in the next week or two to get that started, have them appear. We will publicize this. It's an open meeting. There'll be probably a lot of public comment. So as there is with any major thing that we would be prepared to vote on. There's always the possibility it could get pushed, but that's based upon the comment that we hear and the feelings of each of us.
I'm all for asking the library board for their comment and their opinion, but they, Phil Goldsmith did speak at the last meeting prior to.
Can you speak up? I'm having.
Sure. Phil Goldsmith did speak at the last meeting before we were scheduled to vote, whatever that was, February, March, I don't remember. But at the February, March meeting, when we last discussed this, he said that the library board was prepared to go forward in either avenue that we chose, but they wanted it to happen sooner rather than later. And that was his statements at our board meeting. Now, the pandemic hit and the library board has not pushed anybody for a decision, but I don't doubt that their opinion has changed, that they would like a direction because they've been sitting on stuff for 2 and 3 years.
Let them come next week and tell us.
And we will have them here.
But what I'm saying is he did.
we will have them here to reiterate, he said.
Okay.
Okay? So that will accommodate both of you. Any other comments on that? All right, fine, we'll move on. Any other items on the agenda for next week that anybody would like to ask a question, make a comment? We have purchases, resolutions. We've talked about fire company truck.
Mr. President?
Mr. Siegel.
Yeah, on the agenda, we have the resolution regarding the criteria for real estate assessment appeals. And if we could just have an explanation, if Ms. Cuthbertson's able, for the public. I have received, a large amount of communication, phone calls, emails, et cetera, about it. And I think it would be helpful to explain what those criteria proposed are.
Okay.
And I'd rather not try to do it myself.
She is here, and I'm sure she is more than able to explain that to us. I'm just going by what I see on the contribution of Brooklyn Fire Company. So we'll after Ms. Cuthbertson, we'll.
I think we could probably all agree, residents and staff, that there's a reason we go through this reassessment every 20 years or so. It's not a fun process for anybody, and it's very confusing to some, and lots of calculations. But this is part of the process in our role as the township, both as a taxing authority and an interested party. We're trying to do our role to make sure the assessment is done uniformly throughout the township. To do that, we had to establish some criteria to protect our interest and the interest of everyone. We get calls all the time saying, people are looking at assessments and they seem unfair, things like that. But to do that, we have to come up with criteria to appeal. So we did in conjunction with the school district, who passed a similar resolution at their meeting last week, and in conjunction with our special counsel, who guides us on these matters. So we picked two criteria, one of which is we're looking at all properties that transferred ownership within the past 3 years. Because if you recall, the county has stated that everyone's new assessment should be fair market value as of July of 2019. So we're looking at all recent transfers, and if that differential between the new assessment and the sale price was in excess of $200,000, then that was a property that we're going to take a look at. The second criteria was using properties, the implied fair market value of a property as determined by the county, and comparing that to the new assessment. And if that differential was more than $750,000 or $750,000, then that was also a property that we were going to take a look at, again, in conjunction with the school district in our role as the taxing authorities. By going through both of those criteria, of the 18,000 parcels that are within the township, it's a list of 49. So 49 properties are going to be appealed. And I believe the breakdown is pretty across the board. There are 20 commercial properties, 26 residential properties, and 1 apartment building property. So that process will go through the appeals process. The township and the school district will have the properties appraised, and once we get those figures, we will share them with the property owners and with the courts, and they will decide if the value assigned is appropriate or if it needs a relook.
Thank you very much. Mr. Siegel, does that answer your concern?
Yeah, I wanted the residents to hear it so
Absolutely.
they understand what and why it's proposed.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. And thank you, Amy. Anything else on the agenda that we want to discuss? Could you explain the fire company thing for, well, I know what he wants. Talk about the money.
Yeah,
Good.
So 3 years ago, Brookline Fire Company started a process to replace their own fire company-owned engine. That truck is capable of has foam capabilities, which is a considerable added cost to the vehicle. The vehicle itself costs the price right now, which is ordered and being billed is $750,000. So last year, I had asked, at the time, Larry Gentili, if we could include that in the capital budget moving forward when we ordered the truck. So the fire company is funding the $550,000 and some change part of the truck, and we had asked the township to foot the bill for the chassis and pump, which is part of the fire company township-owned process that we've done over the years.
So the township contribution is
$200,000.
Okay. Any questions on?
That truck, the only one with that capability?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the only truck in the township, yes.
When will that be due?
I'm sorry?
When will that be due? When do you need that money?
It's due now. This is the first payment. It's a prepayment. It gives us a discount on the purchase price of the truck. So there's always a prepayment with these manufacturers. 90 days before truck's delivered, it gives you a discount. So fire company, there's $352,000, I think it's due now. The fire company's paying the $152,000. We asked the township to pay that their portion of the $200,000 of the full price of the truck.
And then the balance is from.
In our budget?
Yes. It was in the approval. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chief.
Anything else? Any questions while we have staff here? There will be a presentation next week to the police department and a proclamation. There's purchase by the rec department, basketball systems. I think it's all part of the park improvement that we all know about. And the Darby Road streetscape to bid opening is Friday. So we hope to award that contract next week. Mr. Holmes.
One of the things we'll be doing next week is acknowledging and accepting our minimum municipal obligation. I think in light of next week's meeting being the regularly scheduled meeting, more attended, more people watching, then I will simply explain once again what the minimum municipal obligation is, what it is we do each year when we adopt this piece of paper, and then assure everybody that we pay more than the minimum municipal obligation each year into our various pension funds.
Okay. Any other questions on the agenda for next week? If they're not, I have one housekeeping rule. I just want to read into the record the roll call that all commissioners were present with the exception of Commissioner D'Amelio, away on vacation.
Mr. President, could I ask that we have 5 minutes in executive session after this meeting ends, and then we can report on the executive session at the
Next
start
week,
of
right?
Next meeting.
No problem.
Of the real
There
estate.
being no other questions, we'll adjourn the work session. Thank you very much and have a good evening, everyone.